and I'm going to hand you over to Gail McGarva, who I'm so thrilled is with us today. Thank you, Gail. It's yours.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Colin. It's a pleasure to be here. And I've met some people through yesterday and hope to meet more of you today. As Colin said, I'm a traditional wooden boat builder, but I'll talk a little bit about, well, more than a little bit, about the intertwining of different threads of my passions. Most people may know, but this year marks finally Britain ratifying the UNESCO Charter for Intangible Heritage. It's been a long time of lobbying from the Heritage Craft Association, and finally it's been ratified this year. In conjunction with that, traditional wooden boat building is now listed on the red list of endangered crafts. Now, I don't see that as a kind of affirming its decline. In fact, the opposite. I see it as really sort of trying to safeguard its future. So, with the traditional wooden boat building, the intangible heritage and culture that's attached to that is multi-layered, really. And I hope to kind of explore some of those threads, really, in the talk today. I think for me, it's all about the story. The story captured in the very shape of the hull. How it expresses, really, its evolution of form and function. So you look at the bare bones of the hull and the story is there. Every boat has a story to tell, and it's about drawing out that story. I think in my work that's what I sort of try to do, is draw out the stories and forge the connection that we as human beings instinctively have towards wooden boats. The story in the hull, the story in the making of the vessel, the story in relationship to the community that's attached to the boat, and the story within the shoreline and within the seascape attached to the boat. Stories fire people, don't they? And if we do need to ensure that there's a future for wooden boats, then we need to ignite that fire, really. People here today obviously probably have that fire in their belly already, but it's about trying to spread that word, isn't it? Definitely. To borrow Ted Frost's title of his book, Tree to Sea, I'm passionate about persuading the timber on its journey from tree to sea. And what I love about traditional wooden boat building is becoming attuned with the actual nature of that specific log that you're working with. And if you have to change log halfway through, you have to adapt. My work in the building of daughter boats is to try and breathe new life into that craft. Obviously, in a modern day context, their use may be very different. So for the Cornish pilot gig, it's completely different what it's used for. It's still about the race, yes, but not about the race for your livelihood, the race for sport. So, the use of those boats in a present day context is very different, but we can still breathe life into that craft. So I just want to firstly tell the story of how my journey as a boat builder began. Not to hopefully be self-indulgent in terms of my story, but really to sort of affirm that the power of instinct, to follow your instinct, to follow your belief in a kind of leap of faith, really. And also to celebrate the heritage around the building of my first daughter boat and how that sort of sparked my journey thereafter. So I lived on boats for many, many years, and I had no formal woodworking skills at all, but I was passionate about boats. I worked for many years as a sign language interpreter with deaf people, so working with my hands, but in a very, very different way. But the living on the boats really, I don't know, it caught something within me that, as far as I was aware, there was nothing in my background or my heritage, that pointed towards that. I come from the west coast of Scotland originally, so maybe so, but there's just something in my gut that responded to boats. So living on them for many years was just a real gift. And then in 2003, I just had a compelling feeling that I wanted to put boats at the very core of my life. But I wasn't really quite sure in what sort of form. So I went on a journey in one of my very old boats to the source of the Thames. And as I was journeying, and the very latter part, if you know it, I'm sure, you're winding and wiggling your way through the sort of carved landscape of, the river is running through. And it was just an amazing experience. But I just absolutely felt that I needed to put boats at the core of my life. And I happened to have I think it was Classic Boat, not Watercraft, I think it was Classic Boat, magazine with me, and I opened it and started to read this article about the Boatbuilding Academy in Lyme Regis. And I just thought, I have got to go and see. So on my return, I journeyed to Dorset, and it was one of those amazing moments. Walked through the workshop door, and that was it. I knew exactly what I needed to do. And there really wasn't any kind of sort of evidence, to affirm that apart from instinct. So this is what I'm saying, sometimes you just have to rely on that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go for this. And I applied for a City and Guilds bursary, which was amazing at the time because that actually covered the whole of the course fees. It's an independent college. So there's no sort of, public grant funding in that sense as an FE college. So I got the bursary, which I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. And so signed up, and in 2004, my journey began, and it was phenomenal. I mean, Colin's, worked there many, many years, and will know that the foundation stage, the first sort of 12, 13 weeks, is so intensive. And yeah, I had a tiny bit of woodworking in an improvised way, but not in any formal way. But I quite like that sort of, when I trained to be a sign language interpreter, I did that from sort of zero. I quite like that kind of immersion experience, and it certainly was. The first 12, 13 weeks were like, whoa, get thrown in the deep end. But I just loved it, absolutely loved it. And during that process, I read another article about a gentleman called Willie Mowat from the island of Unst, who, traditional wooden boat builder. I know some people in the audience have probably actually met him and know him. It was an amazing article by Mike Smiley. It featured other Shetland boat builders as well, but it looked at Willie's conservation of the boats in the Unst Boathaven Museum, which is featured here. And he talked about the fact that there was no other boat builders on Unst to pass the skills on to. He wasn't sort of, emotionally talking about that. He was just saying, this is a fact. But he also talked about the Gardy boat of 1882. I think, she's the very furthest boat in the picture, nearest to the back cloth. Hard to see her lines. Covered in tar, so in a way her lines are quite veiled. But he talked about the beauty of her lines, this open working boat, this rugged, robust vessel and the beauty of the lines. The oldest vessel in the museum, 1882, and she is part of the family of the Shetland model boats. So we have the 6 Serenes, the 6-oared boats, the 4 Reens, the 4-oared boats, and the Ela, the bait boat, and the Gardy boat is an Ela, 18 foot long. So she carries all this history embedded in her hull. After I'd read the article, just to say, with the Boatbuilding Academy, one of the amazing things about that particular course is you can build your own boat. And I was determined to do so. I just thought to see that whole process from tree to sea would be an amazing experience. And after reading the article about Willie, I had this spark of an idea. So I wrote to him, and although I'm Scottish, not that you'd know it from my accent, I acknowledged that I would still be an outsider to a Shetlander for sure. Their allegiances are far stronger to Norway than Scotland on the whole. But I wrote to him and said, how would he feel about being a long-distance mentor in the building of my first boat, which would be a daughter boat to the Gardy boat. So I had no idea how he'd respond. I included my telephone number, and on receipt of the letter, he rang me, and he's a man of few words. Man of few words. But he said, we, the community, would be delighted. So I was just delighted myself. And so the journey then began. So after that foundation period, then in the Christmas holiday, I went to the island of Unst, met Willie, met the Gardy boat and all the other beautiful boats, and wow, I just took a notebook and scribbled down everything that he could speak of, and took photographs and made drawings. I'm a hopeless drawer, but just sort of memory aids really. And also went to Malakoff's Chandlery, if you know it, and came away with a rucksack full of rosehead copper nails and robes, and then returned to the Boatbuilding Academy in the January with the half shape of one central mould. Willie just uses one mould in the building of his boats at midships. So I talked to the tutors, and in fact Jack Chippendale, the late Jack Chippendale, was a guest tutor, and so he was working with me, and said, you know, this is my idea, can we go for it? And they went for it, bless them. They went for it. A lot of the sort of construction of the boat was very alien to somebody like Jack, very, very alien, but you know, he was very, very supportive. We did decide that 3 moulds might be slightly preferable to 1 as your first boat, so we had 3 moulds. A little kind of gem of a moment, I think, during the build. Garboard, for anybody who's a boat builder, the garboard's always the hellish one, isn't it? Well, the garboard in the Gardy boat construction is incredibly V-shaped, really strong V-shape, and then in on the stems. So quite an incredible twist. But Willie always said it's the second plank that is crucial in the Shetland model boat. It dictates the flow of the rest of the boat. So I was like, oh, okay, here we go. So I think initially I was probably ringing him, well, maybe not every day, because I thought that was probably a little bit much, but certainly every week. And he was fantastic. I say a man of few words, but he was fantastic, tutoring me over the phone. Obviously I had tutors on the ground, but it was the specifics of the Shetland shape that obviously he needed to bring into the equation. And also, just to say, I mean, I was on a steep learning curve in terms of the language of boats in English, But if you're building a Shetland boat, you've got to be embracing of the Norn. So Norn is a language that was spoken on the Shetland Isles and is retained in the actual boat terminology. So Willie obviously be rattling them off, you know, Humlebund, Stammeron, Cave, you know, it's like, oh, hang on, where are we, you know? But it was, again, it was just that multi-layered aspect of, here's the boat, here's all the other layers of culture that are interact within it. A language that has almost died away, but is retained in the boat itself. Fantastic. So the second plank. So he said, yeah, you've got to get the flow of the second plank. That is everything. Let's have a little look. It's got this incredible kind of rise to it. And that is what gives the flow to the rest of the boat. Please forgive me if you're very familiar with Shetland boats, but I can't presume that you are. So this second plank anyway. So I talked to Willie about it and said, yeah, but how do I know? You know, how do I know that I've got the shape right, the flow right? And he said, well, you know, you've got those 3 moulds. He said, well, certainly with the 4.5 ones, you're going to have to push it out a wee bit. I was like, okay. So phone call ended, go and talk to Jack. So Willie says, I need to push it out a wee bit. And Jack, if you knew him, was precision, absolute precision. He's like, what's a wee bit? You know, okay, phone call again. Any ideas what a wee bit is? Ah, the larch will tell you, was Willie's answer. It's like, okay, Jack's going to love this. So back down I go, the larch will tell us. Okay. Anyway, I just had to believe in the larch. And, well, I jest, don't I? But isn't it, it's about building by eye, isn't it? It's about standing back. It's about looking at the boat from every angle possible. It's about knowing that actual larch that you're working with and where its kind of thresholds are and when it starts to flatten out and when it needs to have a little bit of persuasion the other way. So I just had to take the risk and I had to start building that belief again in instinct. We all have it, don't we? We have an instinct for building by eye or what looks right on the eye. But it's usually about the confidence in ourselves to believe in it and also, yeah, just having exposure to that, I suppose, and learning that kind of process of believing in yourself. So Jack didn't really have any answers. You know, he just said, okay, you have to read that particular plank and decide yourself. It's your decision. So it was my decision. Second plank done, onwards and upwards. It was the most amazing process to build this first boat. It really was unbelievable and such an honour to work with Willie, albeit long distance, and also to work with the support of the tutors at the Boatbuilding Academy. Willie and I decided that she should be launched from the same slipway as the Gardy boat had been launched in 1882. That her first taste of the sea should be from those waters. So a long journey ensued. We gathered on the day of the Unst show. So after the Shetland ponies had been judged and the sheep had been judged, a little tribe of us went down to the slipway, the same slipway, as I say, as the Gardy boat had been launched. And in the distance was the Boathaven Museum and the mother boat nestled within there. I don't know if, well, I know some of the people have been to Unst, but it is an incredible place. I mean, it feels almost barely touched, really, by the human hand. It is extraordinary. It's beautifully bleak. Stunning, absolutely stunning. And there we were, ready to give, as she's called, Georgie MacDonald, her first taste of the sea. And in that moment, I absolutely knew it's completely about putting your faith in that evolution of form and function. As long as I knew I'd made my boat well, the form of it, the evolution of form, that's something that's been laid down over centuries. That's got nothing to do with me. That's just about its own evolution and its ability to perform in its waters. And so Willie and I took an oar each and out to sea we went. And it was incredible to feel that boat knew exactly what to do. She was totally made for those waters. And then I was smitten. Open working boats, evolution of form and function, building by eye, and building daughter boats. And that's where it all began. This is just a little capturing of Georgie now, weathered beautifully through time, probably unlike her builder. Yeah, she looks pretty similar to the Gardy boat now after 20 years. She's got that lovely weathering of larch and oak and a little bit of verdigris on the copper nails. Yeah, she's a stunning, stunning boat. Nothing to do with me, to do with that evolution of form and function. So now I want to delve a little bit more deeply into another daughter boat and mother boat story, which I think probably embraces virtually every thread I can imagine for me that sort of is an integration of my work, really. I hope you enjoy her. It's the story of the Lerret. So let's now be catapulted to the south of England, to Dorset, to the Chesil Beach. If anybody's been to the Chesil Beach, it's quite a terrain to be launching a boat from. So 22 miles of steep, stony scree. There's a really extraordinary phenomenon. At the Portland end, the pebbles are about the size of a fist, and as it sweeps round to the sort of Abbotsbury end, they're the size of a pea. And so the way the boat is launched according to the terrain that it's on changes. But the inherent characteristics of that boat have been virtually unchanged for centuries. My earliest record in my research is of 1615 to the referral of a Lerret. So, double ender, but completely different to Georgie MacDonald. No way was there anything like a V-shaped garboard. This boat had to be launched from this steep stony scree, so very flat-floored in midships to allow it to shoot down the pebbles. Incredibly beamy to length. Those proportions were played with over centuries until they sort of finally rested on about 17 foot to just shy of 7 foot in the beam. Incredibly beamy. But all to enable it to perform in those waters and its particular method of launching. So the boat is loaded with a vast seine net and a crew of 4 rowers and a skipper, and copse oars. We'll have some images of that, hopefully later on. So they're all set ready on the thole pins, and is pushed then by the remainder of what they call the seine company after the seine nets. So usually about another 6 people on the beach itself, pushing the boat down the scree, the timing of which is dictated by the skipper. If you're in a Lerret experiencing that, which I have, it's quite phenomenal. The speed that you reach by the time you reach the water, because of the steep terrain, is phenomenal. And you do think you're just going to go straight in and be swamped and down you go. But it's that evolution of form and function, isn't it? Incredibly beamy, very pinched in ends for the double ender, an inherent buoyancy in the hull shape itself, the flat floored section to allow it to build up that speed. When you reach the water, it just bobs up like a duckling. It's incredible. They tried the transom sterns, useless in that context. This double-ender was made for these waters. So in about the 1800s, there were hundreds of lerrets, all perched along the crest of the Chesil Beach. There's a lovely sort of rich language attached to the lerrets as well, very particularly in connection with the actual fishing terms. So not a separate language as in Norn, but dialectal words held in the actual fishing terminology. And they've been retained, which is lovely. So on the crub of the beach, the boats would be perched, waiting for the becking. The becking, that's the scout looking out for the mackerel, waiting for that signal to say the mackerel's there, the becking. Just lovely, lovely terms. And again, they vary along the stretch of the Chesil Beach, depending on which bit you're working from. 1800s, hundreds of them, all waiting for the mackerel. Many, many same companies, as I say, usually about 12 people in the collective. It was a massive, massive community activity, from the tiny child to the elderly man, all working together for the catch. And having spoken to many people through the years about the catch, it was the excitement, the adrenaline, and imagine launching a boat in that way as well, shooting down the pebbles, everybody's excitement around the catch. So from May to September, the energy around watching for the mackerel, the surface of the water bubbling, boiling, and the becking being called, such an energy about it. Sadly, that energy faded away. Numerous reasons, but in 2009 there were just a handful, 5 I think I can count, that remained. And Vera here was one of them. She fished from Langton Herring, which is sort of midway along the Chesil Beach, separated by to the Big Sea, as it was called, by Little Sea, the lagoon along the Chesil Beach. She was built in 1923, locally in Weymouth, and she was looked after for about 40 years by a man called Ian Reader and his crew of fishermen. He felt he needed to retire from his fishing life. It's a very, very physical activity, the mackerel fishing off the Chesil Beach. And also, sadly, he felt that really Vera had come to the end of her working life as well. 1923, not bad, really. So she was just wintered up, really. Well, maybe not just wintered, but, you know, forever sat on this little patch of green. I came to hear of the story of the Lerret through a very elderly lady whose brother had a fleet of 5 lerrets when he was alive. And she used to go out on the boats with him, and she started telling me the stories attached to the mackerel fishing. And I started researching it, and it became evident that, yeah, there was just a handful left. So I applied to the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust and put in a proposal to build a daughter boat to Vera and to focus absolutely on the building by eye process. And my mentor for the project is a beautiful man at the Boatbuilding Academy called Roy Gollop. Colin will know him. Built traditional working boats all his life and built by eye all his life. So I put in a proposal that Roy would be my mentor and it would enable him to pass on some of those skills. So this is Roy in the boat. And he's using some of the methods that he uses to record the inside of the hull. Some people would record the external shape of the hull. Roy's preferred method was to record the internal shape of the hull. So we're just taking some references there of Vera. And again, Roy would just use one mould, but even though this was a few years on, I still thought 3 might be handy, especially with such an incredibly beamy boat where you've got an enormous transition of shape. And the first 5 planks have to be steamed in. The planking is elm, Georgie MacDonald's larch. Here we have elm, which the mother boat was planked in. Of course, that was a plentiful timber, wasn't it, in 1923? Much harder to get for Little Sea, as she's called. I was already sourcing elm for the Cornish pilot gig, so I was lucky I did have a contact. But not British, not Cornish narrow-leaf elm, and certainly not British elm. The elm actually came from the island of Bornholm of Sweden. So yeah, I was lucky to be able to get that. So yeah, three moulds and first 5 planks steamed. Wow. The garboard was extraordinary. After steaming, you know, when I released it, I just had to have a look at it. I mean, it's so extraordinary, isn't it, when you lay planks out on the flat on the floor. You can't believe that they will look sweet on the eye when they're back on the boat. You'd have never believed this garboard would have looked right, but when it was lying on the floor, and this kind of tourniquet of elm. But wow, when it's back on the boat, it belongs totally. So a very different process. Steam bent ribs as opposed to sawn frames in Georgie MacDonald. It was amazing to work with Roy. I mean, he taught me a lot about that building of faith in your ability to work by eye. But here we worked, you know, very intensively on that process. We were very lucky because it was built in the Boatbuilding Academy, and above is a mezzanine where the foundation course takes place. So I could run up the stairs and actually look down and get a bird's eye view. I mean, how rare is that in a build? It was just wonderful. And we had a lovely moment, in fact, with the steaming of the ribs when a group of young people who belonged to a centre in Weymouth for people who were struggling in mainstream education, and they were trying to find other activities to sort of fire them, really. And a group of the young men came and helped steaming the rib cage. I thought that would be a really good activity because you get quick visual results. When they arrived, the tutor that was with them said, you know, I don't really know how long their concentration will stay, you know, just bear with us sort of thing. And also there's a need for cigarette breaks and things like that. So it's always been really important to me in every build to involve people in the creation of the boat. But you have to choose carefully which aspect, because you don't want to destroy somebody's confidence. You know, you need to sort of nurture that. So in each of the boats, I've tried to involve people in the process, but not as a community build. It's not a community build. It's myself as the builder, but trying to encourage people to be part of that process and sort of blossom within that. And that was a lovely example, really, of a group of people who hadn't really had exposure to those kind of skills before. I always have a knees up when I build a boat, which is to invite people to create a knee. For those of you who don't know what a knee, it's the right angle bracket that, you know, supports the thwart, the seat. So yeah, I like to encourage people to individually make a knee. And that's, you know, maybe coaching them through a 2-day process if they've never done it before. And of course it depends on the boat, how many sort of intricate bevels there are. But it's a lovely, lovely thing for somebody to create because they have this, they've made the knee. And I usually encourage them to stamp in on the hidden face a little message or their name or whatever, or a date. So that when it goes back into the boat, it's hidden to the outside world, but they know exactly it's their knee. It's a great process. So I think this gives you an image of how beamy a Lerret is. This is the launching of Little Sea. What happened during the build is more and more people came to visit across the length of the Chesil Beach, coming into Lyme. to share their stories of having worked with Lerits. And so word spread. And so when it came to launch day, it was incredible. There were people from the stretch of the Chesil Beach coming to celebrate a new Lerit being launched. I don't think there had been one built for over 40 years, and I think most of those people did not expect one to be ever built again. So it was a wonderful, wonderful moment, and we decided that Vera could have one last day at sea with lots of bailers on board, and we managed to get, I think it was three of the crew who rowed Vera had rowed her in their teenage years, very elderly gentlemen, and so she accompanied her daughter boat out to sea, and the people who rowed the daughter boat had been the instrumental shapers and makers of that boat. And Roy had never been a foreman in a boatyard through his working life, but he always had a real hankering for the bowler hat. Yeah. So on that day, he got awarded a bowler hat, and he wore it with immense pride. And in fact, it's really lovely. Every boatbuilding academy launch thereafter, Roy would be the sort of orchestrator of the event, and he'd wear the bowler hat. Yeah. So now a little twist. I'll just check the timing. So Vera, no longer able to go to sea. Well, obviously she could be restored. She could have been restored, but to be honest, there would be nothing left of Vera, apart from maybe one aspect of her stem. So I thought I wanted to give her a new lease of life, but in a different way. And we come full circle because I go back to the Shetland Isles, to the island of Ulster, and launching Georgie MacDonald. And after I'd launched Georgie, I went for a walk just to kind of clear my head a little bit and take it in. And there, next to the shore, was an upturned clinker boat. It was actually planted on top of some, probably the remains of an old croft, and it was used as a sheep shelter. And I crawled inside and had a quiet moment just with the embrace of that hull. That sort of image just stayed with me, and when I came to think about Vera and her future, because I believe she had a future, but not quite in the ordinary way, I thought, okay, let's see. She was used to being turned upside down every winter on Chesil Beach, nestled into the crub, so I thought she might not protest. I also wanted to really allow Vera's story to be shared with as many people as possible, really. So instead of her being static, like the boat on the Shetland, upturned, I thinking, how can I take Vera to communities? And I was very lucky at the time. I had a little kind of linkage with a local wheelwright in Devon, Mike Rowland and son. And anybody who's involved with the Heritage Craft Association will know the Rowlands very well. So Mike's in his probably late 80s now, and has built a phenomenal range of carriages and wagons and everything, from Covent Garden barrows to whatever. And I thought, I wonder if this might work. So I drew a little picture. As I say, I'm absolutely atrocious at drawing, so it was a bit naive to say the least. And took it to Mike and said, do you think we could work on this together? And he was like, I haven't done something like that before. Yeah, okay, let's go for it. And it was amazing because the overlaps, the echoes in each other's work was wonderful. I mean, Mike had built wagons by eye all his working life. So he plotted out the shape of Vera's hull on his workshop, and he started to create a wagon that was Vera's shape, and taught me how to make wheels, and it was an amazing process. But I was, again, just hoping my instinct that it would work. So I won't go into all the construction, but it was obviously a little bit unusual. Put the scaffolding over the wagon and put Vera on top, and then built the planks up in between. But I just had this vision really of Vera being able to go out and reach people herself. So she is virtually untouched as the roof, apart from 3 thwarts have been taken out so that you don't crack your head when you go in the door. But apart from that, she is just herself. And this is most evident when you're inside. Oh, hello. So there she is, now 101 years old, and complete with her original cubby. And it's a very intimate space. Of course, children love intimate spaces, den-like spaces. Well, adults do too. I certainly do. So the main drive really has been to take Vera to schools and have residencies in schools and share the story of her and her crew. And it is amazing really to be able to do that with children. I mean, to be in an upturned boat I know is unusual, but for children on the whole, instinctively, they just leap inside. They see it as their den, their space. Adults kind of ask for permission. Children just fly inside. They see it as their sense of kind of belonging, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. And it's just wonderful to be able to share the story and also bring that connection of the sea and of traditional wooden boats to perhaps children who wouldn't otherwise have that experience. So we talk about the crew. Ian is second in from the left, and on the back of the picture there are the scribbled, very faint scribbled names of all the crew. And we've got memory objects inside the boat that have been gifted to the boat by the people who have fished her. The corks, the floats, the stones, the stone anchors, the nets, the creels. All these things are so tactile, aren't they? So textural, and something that often children don't get to experience, to touch, to feel, to smell. I mean, she smells amazing, you know. It's just that history, isn't it, in her bones. It's just wonderful. And what I try and work with is, because everybody likes something to take away, don't they? So they take away a little memory plank, which they rivet themselves, and then they capture a memory of the storyboat, either in drawing or in words, and that's their sort of keepsake. So they have a go at the riveting. And I do believe that it's one small seed, isn't it? But it does spread that appreciation. So when you're talking about a Cornish pilot gig, there are 4,000 rivets. They have a go at one rivet. They have a sense of it. They have a sense of beating the copper, what it feels like when that rove bites the oak. You know, all those things, they're vital, aren't they? And then they capture a memory. And they can then take that and then share that. And you might get some children writing, every bit of the plank is full of writing. Others might just go for pure simplicity of Vera, 1923. Others might do it in drawing. It's just what they take away from that experience. And then, sort of full circle really, tree to sea to tree. Here's Vera at rest. We've done quite a lot of work with forestry commissions, with a lot of woodland trusts, taking Vera into the forest, into the oak glade, and children coming and experiencing it in that context as well as in a sea context. So, for Vera, I really do hope it has given her another lease of life, albeit very different to her years at sea. Thinking of things coming sort of full circle, and her returning to her roots. For myself, I've returned to my roots. I'm now living in Scotland, in Galloway, and an amazing thing has come about there in that I'm working freelance, tutoring trainees in a heritage skills training program. So they're learning about timber framing, slating, dry stone walling, and now traditional wooden boat building, which is fantastic. I came to know of them when they were about a third away through a build of a boat, an Ianutrid woodfish, which is the traditional version of elf. And they were struggling. They built a dugout boat, and they got very excited about building boats, and then they got one of Ian's plans and started three boards aside, and they were really, really struggling. And long story, but I was put in contact with them and started working with them. That boat has just been launched. It was the most amazing moment to see that boat finished, to see those young people really blossom. Most of the trainees come from the local high school through a kind of work experience route, or through what they call a kind of Fridays club. And again, it's mainly young people who are really struggling in an academic context. And they come and they try out different crafts and see what fires them. And it's wonderful to see people flourish, whether it be in stone, whether it be in metal, whether it be in wood, whether it's timber framing, whether it's boat building. The three young men I was working with predominantly, incredibly shy at the beginning, incredibly sort of withdrawn. And to see them on launch day and, their pride in rowing that boat out, it was incredibly moving. And they decided to call the boat Tolaga, which is the Old Norse for the patient one. I said that it was, a quality that had really developed in themselves, but they felt it was very much the boat. The boat had had to be incredibly patient through their journey of learning until her day when she tasted the sea. It was a lovely coming together of all those elements, really. And I'm very fortunate in that this October I hope to start a new build, a commission in my own right, but I will be working with two of those trainees through the build. The director of the programme has secured some funding so that half of my week I can work with those young people. So it will be wonderful to continue sort of instilling that belief in themselves and the belief in their skills and the belief in their building by eye. And I hope helps to secure a future for a craft that, as you can probably tell, I'm passionate about. Thank you very much.